Ransomware. What started off as attackers hitting individuals at home has ballooned into an international multi-million-dollar industry targeting large corporations, even targeting parts of our critical infrastructure. What's interesting is that there are ransomware as a service vendors, sites where you can contract for someone to hit a specific organization that you define. So large are these organizations that they even have franchisees, like McDonald's, independents that resell the main brand. And sometimes, even though main ransomware organizations say they have ethics, such as we won't target X, Y, or Z industries, sometimes the franchisees don't give a damn who they hit or recklessly scope their campaign to pick up collateral damage, such as the attacks on children's hospitals. That's what happened in December 2022, right around Christmas. Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital was hit with ransomware. A hospital for sick kids over the winter holidays. Here's the CBC.
And the Hospital for Sick Children says it's dealing with a cybersecurity incident that's affecting several network systems, including some of their phone lines.
Sick Kids says a system failure called the Code Gray went into effect on Sunday night, prompting the activation of the Incident Command Center. The hospital says patient care is unaffected and there's no evidence that personal or health information has been impacted. Chopper 24 is above the hospital for us this morning, giving us that bird's eye view. Officials say third-party experts have now been called in to help resolve the situation.
A few days later, this.
Our Sick Kids Hospital is recovering from a second cybersecurity incident in recent weeks. This after being offered a solution to its problem from the very people that carry out these kind of attacks.
In this example, we have a ransomware gag actually apologizing. Hey, here's the decryption key. Hey, we're not going to do this anymore. The problem is, it already happened. Last summer, there were several small water utilities in rural areas that were attacked. Why? I wanted to find out, so in a moment, I'll introduce you to an expert. This is a story of what's behind bad actor motivations against utilities and industrial control systems. I'm Robert Vamosi. This is Error Code. Years ago, in 2009, I sat down with Howard Schmidt, the first U.S. cyber czar under President Barack Obama. I'd known Howard for years before that interview at RSA, as it was known then, and so we were comfortable just sort of talking. And as we started the interview, I remember Howard looking down and asking if I was recording, and I assured him that I was. Afterward, he asked again, and it wasn't until I got back to my office at CNET that I confirmed what he said. I hadn't actually recorded a single word. My recorder was off. Fortunately, I had taken paper notes, and it was a print interview. I was nonetheless able to write my article for CNET. A few months later, I interviewed Schmidt again, and this time it was for my book, When Gadgets Betray Us. And this time I made sure that I had not only one, but two recording devices handy. I always do that now. In fact, the video of that Howard Schmidt interview is still on the internet somewhere, along with an excerpt of the book featuring Howard that appeared in Salon.com. Longtime listeners to Error Code will note that I usually open with my guests stating their name and something about their company. Well, in the blur of doing multiple Error Code interviews at various locations, sometimes crowded hotel lobbies at this year's RSAC, I forgot to hit record. And I forgot to hit record on my backup device as well. And I didn't realize this until after we'd completed our introductions and launched into the discussion of motivations for hacking ICS. So, my apologies. My guest is Kurt Gaudette, Vice President of Intelligence and Services at Dragos. Dragos is, of course, an industry cybersecurity company that focuses on products and services for non-standard part of cybersecurity. So things like SCADA and industrial control systems and critical infrastructure, instead of your normal enterprise IT computing. The interview starts with me asking about motivations of bad actors in verticals where Dragos plays today.
Well, we started out in electric. That is where we start, but we really cover all the major verticals. Electric is our bread and butter. but oil and gas, different regions, mining. We kind of do a little bit of it all, but I think electric is where we're rooted. So from a manufacturing side of the house, we cover manufacturing a big way. That's one of our major verticals. We also cover building automation, right? So think of HVAC systems, think of HVAC systems supporting data centers, anything supporting a data center from an OT infrastructure perspective. We also go down that lane as well. So you got pretty good coverage.
Nation states, they have political reasons or military reasons for going after targets. But why would somebody go after a water utility in rural Texas?
So hacktivists, political reasons, right? Or emotionally driven reasons, criminal groups. It's about the bottom line, right? And the cash. And the easier it becomes, the more capabilities that are spread around, and the more awareness they have that OT is a target of opportunity, they're going to take advantage of that. And so that's the piece that really disturbs me. Is it's not just the state actors, and I say this loosely, that kind of have a code of conduct or at least some left and right boundaries that they act within. And I go back to my time when I did space technology, and I think you probably would remember this from a tech perspective, but Russia and China were launching some things up into space, right, that caused large debris fields. And that was a big step over the line.
What Kurt is talking about is an event in 2022 when Russia blew up a satellite in orbit and created a very large and uncontrolled debris field as collateral damage. Here's KSAT 12 with more.
If you missed it earlier this week, that was big news. U.S. State Department says over 1,500 pieces of debris are orbiting Earth after Russia recklessly crashed a missile into one of their own satellites earlier this week.
The lives aboard the International Space Station were at risk, including the 4 American astronauts on board.
A similar type of thing could be said for what we're seeing now, and that is, but yeah, so I go back to the Russia and China thing, but there were still thresholds, right? They knew they were going to get them marched, and then they kind of pulled back, and, it was a one-time dealio, maybe a two-time dealio, but there were still boundaries. What I'm concerned with is kind of these lack of boundaries with these hacktivist groups and these criminal groups now. And that's the scary piece. Nothing necessarily holding them back.
What I'm inferring from what Kurt said is that these low-funded utilities aren't necessarily the primary target. That bad actors may be going after specific electronics or devices within that organization, and it becomes collateral damage to what they're really trying to do.
It very much could be collateral damage. The other thing is that sometimes these smaller utilities or smaller businesses, I think sometimes people overlook those and go, hey, that's really not part of the global infrastructure. But if you really were to kind of do the network diagram of, hey, what are the things that are supporting military capability? What are the things that are supporting key transportation for movement of military capability? And you can make these ties a number of different ways, right? But if you really take a hard look, they become a really critical part of critical infrastructure, like a key component. And it's not, and size doesn't necessarily matter. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing, right? It could be a very small, localized, but they provide X amount of power to a particular key enabler or something the United States needs from a national security perspective. And that's where it becomes very interesting. So I don't want to ignore, right, the smaller utility companies or the smaller businesses, because they also play very critical roles. And then
in episode 47 of Error Code, I spoke with Leslie Carhart of Dragos, and she mentioned that with smaller utilities, it literally comes down to that one person who is both the IT and OT professional, as well as the one who mows the lawn and pays the bills. If you haven't already heard that interview with Leslie, she's a masterful storyteller. And in fact, she told the story of a moth that set off alarms in a remote power plant in the Dakotas. I have to wonder if Kurt doesn't have a similar story from his past.
I don't have a Leslie Moth story. We tell that story over and over, and I think that's a great story to identify the type of people that we have working at Dragos. They're very innovative, they're very creative, and they think outside the box, right? Which I think is fantastic. I guess the story that probably I highlight, and it was when I first came out at Dragos, is in my first year, and it was very much about the public-private relationship of things, right? So, as you know, the National Security Agency via the Cyber Collaboration Center, there's the CISOs, there's a number of different Department of Energy, but we do a lot with the Cyber Collaboration Center. They're the ones that are very much reaching out with information, and that will bring up one good use case, and that was the Rockwell automation and vulnerabilities kind of use case. And this is very much about getting reached out to by the Cyber Collaboration Center saying, hey, we have some information. You may have a partner that may want to work with you to solve a problem. Of course, we accepted because we're always in that lane, right? That happened to be Rockwell. The CCC had information about what they suspected, where there was intelligence associated with some capability that could be leveraged to take advantage of these vulnerabilities. They could provide us only so much information that they could declassify, et cetera. So we took whatever information they could give us, pretty much reverse engineered it, build some analytics around that. And they're very much aware that we've got a pretty wide reach into the community via our tech. And some great things about our tech is wherever we have platform and whether we have OT Watch where we can hunt in the environment, we can run these analytics and see whether that capability at that time was active in the community. We also have something called Neighborhood Keeper, which is our anonymized resource that sits in platform as well, that basically sits through a bunch of metadata in an anonymized fashion. And that's another way for us to go, and it runs the gamut, again, a global gamut, where we can say, hey, if we run this analytic in this environment, is this capability out there in the wild somewhere? And it just gives us a good sense, is it or is it not? We don't know anything more about the customer except for maybe, hey, it might be in North America, right? And depending on the density of the numbers of platforms that we have, right? We could say, hey, maybe it's in the northeast side of North America, or it's maybe in Asia, or maybe here. And then we can send an anonymized message across the net and go, hey, we know there's 3 or 4 instances of this going on somewhere. Phone home ET, right? Does anybody want to provide more information? And we do have people that phone back and go, yeah, this is what we're seeing. Can you help us out, right? And we'll work with them to kind of get a better picture of what's going on. And kind of back to this Rockwell thing, we did just that. We got some hits. We worked with the community to kind of determine what it is. We worked with Rockwell, a good chunk of time in advance of the release of those vulns publicly. And so by the time they actually released those vulnerabilities, and I'll be fair and say, hey, it was just not Dragos. It was a few different companies working in a common space to really prepare ourselves for that release. And so by the time they released it, a good chunk of the community was already aware and kind of working in the background to get ahead of it in case the adversary did decide to take advantage of it, right?
So Kurt mentioned public-private, and I find it interesting. I come from a background working with ISAC, so that's just one example. What I'm hearing is that Dragos actually gets some of their own customers, independent of ISACs, to come forward and say, we would like to help educate our community as well. And I'm seeing that sort of bubbling up within the industry in general. Is that a sign that there's a maturation in the IoT and OT space?
There is maturation going on. It's not going on at the rate that we need it to go on. I'm sure other people have said this, right? But I'm heartened by the fact that I'm seeing it, right? I'm seeing the awareness level rise for operational technology and exactly what it means. But I would really like it to be part of the public conversation space where they can just go, oh, operational technology, that means my lights, my water, what I buy at the store. And when people can make that connect, then it means so much more. But I think a lot of people automatically default to the IT side of the house and we go, oh, it's just information they're stealing. And of course, people are concerned about getting their credit card information stolen or this information or that or intellectual property. But I also look at it intellectual property of the OT space, right? So when you have a strategic entity coming into these environments and here I'm talking about bolt site, or what's commonly known as bolt type boom, right? Sitting in an environment, maybe, in a case of some of the customers that we've recently dealt with lately, 300 days or more, conducting espionage and really kind of showing, hey, how does this particular entity have their operational technology set up? And think about it, they did the same thing, and they do in the manufacturing way. Hey, how do they set up in the manufacturing to get the most out? So there's IP in that space, not only from hey, how do we do business and conduct business, but boy, how do I attack this later on? And how do I shut it down? How do I manipulate it, destruct, whatever? So I think that part of that intellectual property space is also key, and it's very much associated with operational technology this way.
So with the broadening of people's perspective of what OT means, it's very important, that we talk about the connectivity to other things. For example, like the interstate freeways in the United States, they had a military design behind it so that they could move materials from one part of the country to the other fast. So you get a lot of flat roads. That's the type of awareness that might be needed with a common device in your OT environment that can be leveraged by a nation state. And people would be like, what? No, it's an internet-connected toothbrush. What are you talking about?
So I want people to be aware enough that, from a national security, and this is asking a lot, right? So I want people to be aware of what national security needs. Just the fact that you brought up the interstate. I don't know how many people are aware of why the interstate system was built, or, hey, why is our rail structure built the way that it is, right? Why is the shipping and the port system built the way that it is? Built for both defense and to project power. A lot of that, right? National security, with national security in mind. So yeah, I would love for that awareness level to go up so they realize that these small things, or aggregate, a lot of small things can lead to secondary and tertiary effects that people aren't even considering right now.
So what do you say to a prospect who is struggling with their IT world, and you come walking in the door and saying, oh, wait, there's more. What about OT? There's this whole OT world that people just aren't dealing with in general. How do you start that conversation? And I'm not asking for a sales pitch here.
No, there's no sales pitch. I think how we start that conversation is about taking a journey, right? And it's about understanding, what is it that I can do to make a difference in a customer environment, and from a customer perspective is, hey, what are the key things that I can actually do that makes a difference on things? We always lead with the 5 critical controls. It's a SANS written paper. Rob Lee, Tim Conway wrote it together, and basically they took all of the activities that they had seen to date and said, what are the common factors? What are the things that these adversary groups can most easily take advantage of? And then what, from a customer perspective, can they do to better secure their environment? Just from what are the 5 basics, right? Have a plan, design, a secure architecture, is visibility and monitoring, secure remote access. It's, risk-based vulnerability. Those are those 5 saying, build a defensible architecture. I think I flipped something there. That was the second one, right? But if you do these 5 things, and these are not an overnight thing, these are a multi-year effort, right? But you have to start somewhere. So you give people some place to start. And I'm also very open. It doesn't have to be with us, right? But hey, here, and Sam's writes for the community, right? So, hey, community, these are the 5 things that if you do them, this makes defense doable. And I think people don't realize that it's doable, but you make it harder for these adversaries to get into your environment, and it's less likely they're going to get into your environment. And for those people, for those companies that we see implement those critical controls, they're pretty successful, right? So if my pitch or my getting off the stage line is defense is doable, I think that is the one I'd want.
In addition to those 5 things in the SANS paper, does Kurt have any other guidance for utilities and ICS?
Well, those best practices are rolled back into my 5 critical controls, right? Because pretty much everything that we do is derived off of those. We use those as the basis for how we do business.
So I have to wonder, how concerned is Kurt about supply chain attacks within ICS?
Supply chain affects everything, right? So you should be aware what you're dependent on, what comes into your environment, what the age of the things are in your environment, what the updates to those things are. Be very aware, the vulnerabilities, and some vulnerabilities are supported, others are not, right? So not all companies are made the same. So some original equipment manufacturers won't support continuing to build patches for that gear after a certain amount of time. So it's just be aware of all of those factors, right?
And with the OT world, often these devices have gone beyond their lifetimes and they're still in use. Are there ways to mitigate those vulnerabilities as they come up?
Yes, 100%. And that is something that Dragos is very serious about, right? It's about identifying what mitigations you can do. And we found like the vast majority of vulnerabilities that are outlined in the advisories don't come with mitigations at all. I can't remember the percentage right off of my head, but there are a lot that do not. And what we do is we roll through the operational technology associated vulnerabilities and we provide those mitigations back into it. Not only we provide those mitigations, we correct them for errors. And then we categorize these vulnerabilities into 3 basic categories of what we call now, next, and never. So for companies that are not as mature, or even mature companies, you get a deluge of, here are all these vulnerabilities in your environment. Well, what do I do about that? Particularly from an operational technology perspective, because hard to shut down my manufacturing line, hard to turn off electric distribution, right? So I have to plan and work to find a time to do a patch. And then out of all of those ones that are out there, out of all those vulnerabilities identified, which one should I do first? So we spend the time at Dragos as you go, now, next, never. And in the now category, it's 6%. Only 6% are in that category of, these are the ones that really matter. These are the ones that are associated with the Volt Typhoons or the Volt sites of the world, right? So giddy up on those. 63 and 31 are the next 2 categories, right? So you have a little bit more time to deal with this. Deal with these as you can, but these ones, get after now. And I think that really helps the customer and the community at large to just deal with this overflow of information and just help them start getting after problem.
I'd like to thank Kurt for coming on the show and talking about the motivations behind bad actors attacking ICS. Hey, if you're enjoying Error Code, tell a friend. I'm sure there are other people out there who like narrative information security podcasts. And I'd really like to hear from you. Go to errorcodepodcast.com to get more details. And tell me what you like, and even what you don't. I've got some great episodes coming up. We'll have more on Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, and hacking utilities supply chains. Subscribe today. I don't want you to miss out.